So my name's Nick Drew and I'm part of a transition town group called Planet Heswall, which was formed in 2019. So we're a community group. We're not for profit, we're non-political, non-campaigning, but we're really about trying to make our Heswall community more sustainable and resilient. So how we can reduce our carbon emissions, but also crucially how we can build community resilience at a local level so that we can deal with some of the challenges that we think are coming. Yeah, so we hear a lot about reducing our carbon emissions and getting to net zero by a certain date, but actually we've had a lot of emissions that have already been put into the atmosphere, and we're starting to see, already on the news we see things that are changing in the way that our weather systems are changing as the climate starts to change. So even if we stopped emitting CO2 today, we've already stored up a lot of these gases in the atmosphere, which will carry on changing our weather for years to come, decades. And we need to start to think about how we cope with these changing weather patterns as the climate changes, rather than just hoping that by reducing our emissions we can carry on living our lives as they are today, because we just can't. Our lives are going to have to change to deal with the changing climate. So we're already seeing things at a global level, like the ice caps melting, both in the North Pole and the South Pole. We're seeing glaciers melting and changing the water patterns around Asia and other places. We're seeing increased desertification as countries become drier, as the rainfall patterns change. More hurricanes hitting the American coast. And what we're expecting to see here on Wirral is a lot of higher rainfall patterns in both the summer and the winter. So in the winter we're expecting there to be a lot more rain, more flooding, higher number of storms happening. In the summer we're expecting there to be longer periods of drought, but then interspersed with some really heavy downpours as well, so we'll have some sort of sudden flash flooding type events, and some really intense storms that will just be sort of very localised, but will really be quite disruptive for everybody. Yeah, so I think you've got to think about every aspect of your life really when you start to think about how the climate change will affect us. So things as basic as food, if we have more droughts and then more rainfall, sudden rainfall events and floods, what's going to happen to the crops? What's going to happen to crops worldwide, and where does our food come from? So here, where we're standing today, this used to be a field where people were growing food about 100 years ago before it became a park. And that kind of thing, with more local provision of food, is going to have to be increasingly taken up by people to be able to make sure that they've got supply chains that will weather these storms. But you've also got to think about things like transport. So when it's really, really hot and the tarmac starts to melt on the roads, or the rails start to buckle on train lines, these are the kind of things that our infrastructure we've got today was built for a time when we didn't have these kind of extreme weather events. Things like our sewer network is only scaled to deal with a certain amount of rainfall. So we're going to get more groundwater flooding as a result of heavier downpours. Yeah, so I think the first thing is to understand what the risks are in your particular area, and that's partly about are there areas that flood, or areas that where you've got a particularly vulnerable population. Look at your local area and understand what challenges you might be facing from some of the things that we've discussed before. But in terms of other support out there, there's an organisation called the Merseyside Resilience Forum, and they have got a risk register and a number of tools that will allow you to start to look at the kind of emergency response. In the longer term, there are websites like the Communities Prepared website, which will talk about how to make your community more resilient, and a whole range of tools there and different things you can do, whether it's things like flood response or local food, or how to coordinate yourselves as a group. Wirral Council have got the Wirral Emergency Volunteer Scheme as well. And basically the advice is really just like the Cub Scout motto: be prepared. Just think about what's coming your way and make some plans ready to deal with it.